Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing Podcast. I'm your co host, Chris Seveney, along with Jamie Bateman. And today we have a special guest out on the West Coast from Southern California. We have Flavia Berys, who is an author, an attorney, a real estate broker, a business consultant. And that's just kind of I'll say, peeling the first layer of the onion back off of some of the things she can provide. So, Flavia, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. This is exciting.
Yes. So I was on her podcast, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago, and it was a really fun and entertaining podcast. And I was like, Flavia, you have to come on our podcast as well. So, from that perspective, so why don't you just briefly just tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what your enjoyments are and passion is in real estate?
Sure. The list would be shorter if I tell you what I'm not into in real estate, because my dad was a real estate developer. So I think, I don't know if it gets baked into you from birth or just from growing up and sort of hearing all the adventures. My dad would show us blueprints and plans and ideas that they had for some kind of innovative things they were doing. This was all in South America, so not even here in the States. Eventually, he did some development in Florida and different places, but so I grew up just loving real estate, but didn't really know that would become my career. I at first actually thought I wanted to be in publishing because I'm a writer. I love to write. I was an English major in college, and I just kind of assumed that there were these great jobs out there for writers, where I would be a novelist or something of that sort. Well, that's when you're, very idealistic and you're liberal arts, college student at UCLA, which is a very liberal school too. And then once I graduated, I realized like, oh, I have to find a job. My first job was actually as a copywriter. So I was able to make money from being a writer, but I quickly realized it wasn't enough. I didn't want to just write for other people and put their words into advertisements and things. I wanted to be an entrepreneur and do my own thing and get into business. So I was in publishing for a while. I actually published a local, one of those free magazines that has articles in it, and you can pick up at the grocery store and at the drugstore at the time. And I did that for about 2 years, which taught me a lot. First of all, it taught me that if your expenses are the same as your revenues, it's not really the business for you, no matter how fun it is or how much you're enjoying it. So I quickly realized I need to try some other things, go in different directions, and ended up doing graphic arts for a little while. And then ended up deciding, hey, I'm going to do what my dad always said I should do, which is go to law school. Went to law school, actually really enjoyed being a law student for the academics of it and just all the theory and kind of the philosophical stuff. And I found it pretty fascinating, but I gravitated towards all the real estate stuff, the real estate classes, contracts classes, the agency class I found fascinating. So I think it really was my path from the very beginning. And I ended up doing what I always knew I would do, which is working with developers, being an entrepreneur myself, and being a real estate investor.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So from writer to attorney to real estate investor. So what's your favorite type of real estate investment? Do you fix and flip, buy and hold? What's your preference? Or what
So
depends on, I'm sure the weather, but and what's hot, but what do you like to do?
that's such a good question, because I often, and you get this too, right? Because you're both in real estate. So you'll
Yep.
have people who are not in real estate say to you, hey, I want to get into real estate. Like, I've heard real estate is the way to build, a family legacy and to build wealth, and that it's a way to diversify. I shouldn't just be in the stock market or just put money in my IRA or 401k. Real estate, what should I do? And right, like, we look at
Yep.
these people and we're like, oh man, like, it's a blank canvas for you. Like, there are so many different ways that you can be involved in real estate, right? You can, I can tell you though, don't you almost wish we could have like a 2-hour webinar where we go through and just educate people who've never heard of any of this stuff? Like, here is what this is, like fix and flip. Like, that's a thing that people do, right? Here's a thing. It's called like buy and hold. What does that really mean? What do people mean when they say that? I mean, it would probably take a good 2 hours to go into all of it. But what I like best probably is single family home rentals, and not
Mhm.
everyone's a fan. Some people are like, oh no, please, I'd rather, own a duplex or a fourplex.
Mhm.
But I love just having like that little that square on the checkerboard that is like my land, my
Yep.
property, and like I'm responsible for providing
Mhm.
a home for the tenants that live on that land, and for it has a yard and has its own little parcel. I dig that. So I like that more than maybe just being a passive investor in like a apartment syndication. But other people are like, oh no, apartment syndication all the way. I just want to put my money in. I want to get my check every month, and I don't even care what the thing looks like, which is perfectly valid too.
I don't consider them
Yeah.
real estate investors though, in that sense, because for me, like I have to roll up my sleeves and Jamie can talk about his experience, but we've all done, I come from the commercial real estate general contracting side. So I've done like some fix and flip slash most of my fix and flips actually I've fixed and held. I did the bigger pockets burr strategy, of fix it up, rent it out, get my money back out. And then, my wife and I, we built our single family house. So we did the new construction thing. I agree. I like single families. And then I kind of stumbled upon notes and it's like, wow, this is great because it's really what fits everyone's preference because it is not a one size fits all based on your lifestyle and what you're good at. And, you know, kids and family and spouses and, you're in San Diego, which is a really hot market, and Jamie and I are in the Washington D.C. area. So for Jamie and I, if there's try and get a property that needs rehab, by the time it hits the market, it's already sold before we could even like consider driving out to it. So we have to either look elsewhere or another market. So that's how kind of I think gravitate. That's how I gravitate. It's Jamie can kind of tell his story though.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys have said. I love that fact about real estate and note investing, which is just really kind of a niche within real estate investing, is the fact that you can do whatever you want. I mean, it's really so many different options. It's not one size fits all, even within single family or multifamily. There's all these niches within the niches, which I think can lead to issues for people as well, because they get shiny object syndrome and, don't stay focused enough to get good at anything and don't know where to start. But I love the single family space as well. And then I think notes work well with that. Chris and I have done podcasts we did one episode on the top 10 reasons to invest in mortgage notes. And then we did the next one on the top 10 reasons not to invest in mortgage notes or not to get involved in. Everything has pros and cons.
Sure.
You got to fit, what works for you and your lifestyle and your goals and that kind of thing. One thing I found interesting with what you said already, Flavia, was just, people talk about, do what you love and then, you'll love what you do kind of thing. And so follow your passions. And I think that can be good advice on some level, but I also think following the money can help you love what you do in some sense. So just an interesting dynamic there. I wonder if you could touch on that again a little bit. I mean, I'm not saying you're just chasing the money and only the money, but I think if you only follow your hobbies and passion, you might end up hating them. And if you do follow kind of where you can be profitable, I think you can still find something within that niche that you really enjoy, but you're also making money. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally, totally. I think there's like this, it's almost really misleading when especially when people tell like young people like in college or high school, like follow your dreams, follow your passion, it'll all come together and you'll find a way to make a living from something you're super passionate about, where you wake up in the morning like, I can't wait to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's misleading. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't tell if a 17-year-old came to me and they're like, hey, I'm about to be an adult. And my parents already told me they're kicking me out of the house. Like I have to make a living. What should I do? Here's the 5 things I'm I love playing video games. I love, walking my dog along the beach. Like, yeah, those are passions. Those are the things we truly just do for fun.
Mm-hmm.
It is not always going to align with, and I'll give you a perfect example, right? So if the person said to me, well, I love walking my dog on the beach, so I'm thinking maybe I should be a professional dog walker. Well, maybe they could. And I actually know someone who is a professional dog walker and they do quite well. But they took it the entrepreneurial route, and rather than just walking a few people's dogs, they built like a whole dog walking company, and they have like 30 dog walkers. And so now really, do they ever walk a dog? No, they just walk their own dog, and maybe they're filling in for people. So now it's all the pressures of being a business owner. And being a business owner isn't being a dog walker, right? It's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure they actually got what they thought they were getting. So I'd rather tell people, just find a job that it doesn't have to be your passion, your hobby, your ultimate love. It can just be a job that you're good at, that you fit well with, that you find contentment with, and like a sense of job well done at the end of the day kind of thing, and that the challenges keep it interesting. But I'm really big on finding a job that doesn't make you take a antacid every night, or a bottle of wine every night. Like, find a job that's not super stressful, because I actually think stress is like a health. It just kills your health. Like stress, it pops out in other ways, right? Someone has a backache and it's really just stress, or they start getting migraines and it's really just stress. So if you can find a job that's not too stressful, that you're good at, that makes you good money, and then take that money and go do all your passions and hobbies and things.
Yeah,
So,
totally agree.
No, I agree 100%. And, unfortunately, most, whether you're an entrepreneur or not, there's always stress in different aspects. But again, it's, some of it's self-induced versus, working for someone else. I want to hop back quick to, because your rental portfolio and stuff. Now in San Diego, in the area you invest with high-end rentals, I'm guessing it's more investing on appreciation than cash flow, or maybe a little bit of cash flow, but I'm guessing the numbers typically probably don't look that great compared to other parts of the country. And we always see that debate of, I'd rather have a rental at cash flow is $500 a month, but at the end of the day, it's got zero appreciation. Then if you bought something, last year, say 2 years ago in San Diego, it's like, okay, great, you're making that $500 a month. Come see me in 7 years and let's see who's doing better at that point in time. That long game and long play. I'm curious, kind of your strategy from that perspective.
No, absolutely right. Just to give you an example, right? We sold one condo here in San Diego, a small 2-bedroom condo in like a mid-rise building, and that translated into 7 single-family homes in other markets, like without putting an extra dollar in. Well, maybe a few dollars here and there for some loan costs, but it's interesting, just the differential in prices, right? And San Diego, I think, is a great market to buy into if either you have a really great plan for Airbnb or some sort of corporate housing, because that's where you can actually do pretty well on rents, and then the rents will cash flow. With the flip side being that the city of San Diego currently, when we're taping this, is they're proposing a lot of different restrictions and regulations on Airbnb that's going to kind of put a damper on that. So, I mean, who knows what'll happen, but if they pass what they're proposing to pass right now, it's going to be a lot harder for an investor to come in and have a portfolio of Airbnbs unless it's in, specifically zoned proper areas. So, but there's a really good play and strategy there. Rental housing near the military bases in general, you're never going to have a vacancy because there's so much like moving in and out, and there's always a need for housing. So that's almost always going to be a slam dunk as far as a rental. But the prices don't always work, as you say, for cash flow. The best bet in San Diego is to at least try to break even on carrying costs versus rents, and then kind of wait for rents to go up, because of course rents go up over time. Rents never come down. Rents didn't even come down during the last recession. They barely dipped. At least here in San Diego, they stayed pretty constant, even when the home values dipped.
Are they staying constant right now? I'm just curious, because I'm seeing like even in the DC market, a lot of Class A stuff has, I'll say, taken a big hit because they had a lot of supply come on the market in the last 3 years. So they're about a 7% dip right now, which is pretty substantial when, let's say, average rent is about $2,600. So, I mean, it's probably, close to a $200 a month whack on that. So I was curious with what's going on in the world now.
San Diego really hasn't, but areas like San Francisco have seen like a 50% drop in rents. And that is really a factor of what we're living through right now, which is, COVID, telecommuting and companies allowing people to move to less expensive markets and still keep their job in a city like San Francisco, where housing is extremely expensive. And a lot of those jobs were lost. A lot of companies in the Bay Area had layoffs, but I don't think you're seeing the rents dipping in other, coastal California cities. For the most part, LA, Los Angeles wasn't really dependent on these like tech companies. They do have a small area called, I think, Silicon Beach in Santa Monica.
Mhm.
And by the way, Silicon Beach, there is, I believe, Silicon Mountain is kind of the next big tech market, tech area, and that's over in the Reno Valley, just at the
Okay.
base of the lake, the Tahoe Mountain area. So
Interesting.
but in San Diego, another really smart move is fix and flip in San Diego is fantastic. It's just really hard to find something to buy. So you can't be looking on the MLS for those kinds of opportunities. You literally have to knock on the door of a distressed property
Mhm.
and see if you can try to get in touch with the owner and just buy it direct from an owner and, hey, your house looks terrible, but we're interested, we'll buy it, that kind of thing. And but there's a good market for that. And it's pretty good for multifamily, and it's really, really good for house hacking, especially for military who can buy with a VA zero down loan.
Yep.
San Diego is fantastic because you get shipped here. This is where you have to live for 2 or 3 years. It's great that you can buy a 1 to 4 unit. It's harder to find the 3 and 4 units. Easier maybe to find a duplex, but zero down. You get in with a VA loan, low interest rates right now,
Mhm.
and if you rent out the other units, you can sometimes live, housing cost free, and then
Mhm.
at the end of it, you've got a nice rental for yourself.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've never thought of that with the VA and stuff. It's an interesting theory. So I also wanted to kind of touch base a little bit as well because you are kind of a small business lawyer as well, and kind of do stuff regarding helping entrepreneurs and real estate investors. What are some of the things that you do to assist these small businesses and entrepreneurs? What are some of the services that you provide?
Sure. There's well, it's kind of different, sort of different buckets, right? So you have
Okay.
your real estate investors, and the kind of legal work that they need is a lot of times entity formation and corporate governance, which is sort of the work you do to maintain an LLC or a corporation or an
Mhm.
S corp, whatever entity works best for them. And the actual purchase and sale contracts. Just today, I had to draft an indemnity letter. Um, had to help someone with a settlement agreement, over a dispute about the property that
Mhm.
recently changed hands. So there's definitely, and I'm a transactional lawyer, so almost everything I do involves. There's the writing I always thought I would do, right? So it's
Yep.
all like contracts and documents and
Mhm.
um, reading. I'm sure if I wasn't a lawyer, I wouldn't need glasses yet, right? But it's yeah, and then there's also just deals to be made, and then disputes to be mediated. I don't do litigation, so if anything reaches that litigation stage, it gets referred out to a litigator, and then I stay involved, sort of supervising the matter, but letting someone else be the one to duke it out in court. You'll find that most lawyers, tend not to be a generalist, and they tend to focus either on transactional or litigation,
Mhm.
but not really as often focusing on both equally, unless maybe they're in a small market, like a small town lawyer, and they're really like the one shop in town. They probably do it all in
Yeah.
in that case.
So one thing I always hear people complain about, I'm curious to your opinion, and again, you're not providing legal advice to anyone out there. She's an attorney, but not your attorney. So I'll start with that. People always complain about like the $800 it is every year, or whatever, for the California LLC, and trying to find ways around that. And I kind of
Oh, I know.
part
California's the worst.
yeah, part of me chuckles. It's like, okay, if you're going to be, it's $800. Yes, I know. But if you're looking at buying like a few $100,000 property, like $800 is really a drop in the bucket. But I was just curious because I hear people try and do some crazy stuff about like setting something up in Delaware as some type of like, statutory trust or all these other random things that just seem extremely complex and difficult. I'm just curious if you've been through that, or you just tell people, sorry, you got to suck it up and pay the $800.
Sure, it's actually kind of a fascinating question because California is so unique in this regard. California is its own. So before we get to that, like entity, like jurisdiction selection, there's one other thing. This is like a public service announcement, because in all the Facebook groups lurk in, I see people asking this question, and then I just see like the worst advice from the law offices of Facebook posters. It's like, it's called the law offices of random Facebook commenters, because there's just some terrible advice. And the one that I see a lot is someone will say, I want to transfer my property into an LLC. Can I just pull something off Google and do that myself? So please, folks, if you're thinking of transferring a property you already own into an LLC, please speak to somebody that's super knowledgeable in real estate, whether it's a real estate agent that you trust, or a lawyer would be your best bet if you have someone that you can go to at least get advice and to do it right. I'll tell you that here in California, if you were to do that, there's so many issues. The first is, if the property's financed, you can't do this without the lender being completely in the know and consenting to it, and sometimes even using the documents that they mandate for it. There's also, you can completely mess up title on your home by just doing it incorrectly and filing the paperwork incorrectly, because now there's this like defective deed or quitclaim deed on title that later needs to be figured out. And if the original people that put this document together and signed it and recorded it aren't around anymore, it gets really messy. And I know that because I've helped people try to unravel that mess. And it has to be done very, technically correctly. And if you're not an expert in that, or someone experienced in that, or you don't know which escrow company to use, title company, you can create some messes for yourself. There's also tax implications. In California, there's a transfer from a human to an LLC. It's a taxable event. Unless you have this magic language in the deed and, the beneficial interest doesn't change, like the ownership doesn't change. So there's all these like little nuances. So you better know what you're doing if you're going to be doing that. Please don't go to Google and pull off a quitclaim deed. Try to fill it out. Not really sure if you did it right. And then run to the county recorder's office, pay your $20 or whatever it is, record it, and then hope for the best or think you're protected. Another thing is, people think if the property is in an LLC, I am no longer able to be sued. And that is just not true. Let's say I own a property and it's in an LLC, but then I'm the one on site taking applications and showing the property to people. Well, and I say to somebody, yeah, I really don't like to rent to people with kids at this showing, right? Mm-hmm. I can be sued. Having title held in an LLC will not stop them from suing me for fair housing violations, right? So it's not always this like perfect shield. But to what you said, yes, I'm not anybody's lawyer here. So if you're considering forming a Delaware LLC, or a big favorite right now is Nevada, Wyoming is always a big favorite. And so that you can operate something in California, just beware. There's California, it's worse than Big Brother. Like, some people don't even understand how California found out about it when they get the nasty gram from the franchise tax board saying, where's your $800? And the Secretary of State wants you to register with them as a foreign LLC. You're going to end up paying double the registration fees. You're going to have to be in both the home state for the LLC and registered in California. And yes, California will come after their $800, and they are ruthless. And they were impossible to get a hold of. So if you ever make a mistake, you'll stay on hold for 6 hours trying to fix that mistake.
Most attorneys I use, like when people talk about, again, entity formation stuff, I used to say, yes, Delaware long ago was great for LLCs because of kind of the laws that were shaped. But they said long ago. Nowadays, pretty much every state is caught up in most instances. And, most attorneys I talk to say there's really not much benefit. And I know people pick like Wyoming, so because your name is hidden, but my attorney's like, that's great that they don't know who you are, but the minute they sue you, they're going to find out who owns the entity, at some point in time. So, or like, we're in the note business. Like, people set up all these LLCs or all these, these trusts and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but the minute you have to foreclose, you have to sign something that says like you hold the physical note and you're the owner of the note. So eventually you have to sign a name on behalf of the trust. So eventually someone really wants to find out who you are in today's world, it pretty much
not that
can.
hard.
Yeah, it's not super hard. And most people, we don't have, I know I don't have, hundreds of millions of dollars. And these people who start setting up all these LLCs and so forth, it's like, yeah, I don't own any property and this is my first one. And I want to go spend $10,000 getting all this stuff set up because this is what I read on, Facebook Attorneys of America. And I just sit there and I'm like, oh, put my head down and just want to cry.
Well, and the other thing is you get advice from people, on Facebook and other places that it's so black and white when they give the advice, it's like, well, you should never use an LLC. You should always use a trust. It's like, well, you don't even know the situation at all.
Or set up your LLC because for tax purposes, it's like an LLC is a pass-through entity, and, it does, it goes on your, schedule of your own tax return unless, but people.
Yeah, it's so a lot of people say, I need an asset protection lawyer, or what is asset protection law? And here's the thing that's sobering. The law is not designed to be friendly to people trying to hide their assets. Because the law, wants justice and, the right thing to happen. So if somebody owes somebody money legitimately, then there are many mechanisms for how to get that money from that person. And as far as liability protection or asset protection, the law has only really developed like a very few rules about it, right? And so we do actually allow people to have this separation where there's, business debts, but they're not your personal debt because you own the business. And just to not be complicated, let's say if you own an LLC and the LLC owes somebody money, chances are they can go after the LLC for the money, but it is a lot harder to come after you, the owner of the LLC, for that money. So there are kind of these little gates, and they are somewhat of a shield, but it's almost never going to be this like perfect bulletproof plan. And people are like, please put together a plan for me that makes me completely bulletproof. Like, I just don't want anyone to ever be able to take anything of mine, no matter what happens. And really, the best answer is not in a like LLC, shell LLC with like a series LLC or all these things people are trying to do. That's not the best strategy. And again, this is not legal advice for your particular situation, whoever you might be that's thinking like, oh, I'm going to go do whatever she's about to say. But for the most part, it's an insurance strategy that is something you need to really look at so that you have adequate insurance, rather than just relying on like how you've set up your LLC org chart or scheme to try to insulate yourself. Because again, like Chris, exactly what you said, it's even if your LLC is completely anonymous in the records of Wyoming, the minute that you would get sued because you hit someone with your car, in that lawsuit, they're going to say, you must divulge every single asset you own. Do you own any LLC interests in any other state? And you would be perjuring yourself if you say no. So of course you're going to say yes. So the anonymity helps you when attorneys do like a preliminary search to see if you're worth suing. So I mean, there is a benefit to all these things that people want to do. There is sometimes a benefit to forming an LLC in Wyoming or in Nevada. But it's not going to be this like bulletproof answer that people think it is.
I look at it like kind of like home security, just as a quick analogy. It's like I used to study this a little bit, but there's no perfect solution to be 100% secure in your home. I mean, there's just not. At the end of the day, a loud barking dog and some good lighting, exterior lighting is good. And obviously this all depends on where you live and that kind of thing. But if somebody wants to break into your home, they can do it. It's like you just want to put up some hurdles and make it more difficult. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, let's go with that. Let's go with this analogy, okay? Right, let's go with this. So, and by the way, the barking dog thing, there is some sort of alarm, I don't own it, But I remember when I was looking at some security systems, I saw it online, and I think, well, I don't even want to say what it's called because I don't want to accidentally say it wrong or plug the wrong company or something, but it's a barking dog that it's like motion activated barking dog. So if somebody goes near your front door, there will be like from inside your house,
That's
and
funny.
it's like a deep throated, like Rottweiler type dog, barking right on the other side of the door. But so you don't actually need a dog. You might just need a
Okay.
dog sound.
Right.
But let's go with your analogy. So if I say to you, hey, I want like as secure a house as possible, you would never tell me all you need is the most amazing locks on all your doors, and you can ignore cameras, you can ignore lighting, you can
Right.
ignore a dog, you can ignore signage. Like all you need is really good locks. You'd never say that, and you'd never say the contrary. Like you can put, you don't even have to lock your doors as long as you have good security cameras. You would tell people, let's do a little of everything that's available to us. Let's put on like good locks. Let's have some good lighting on the exterior. Let's make sure we trim the bushes near the windows, or, let's have some motion detection like type cameras. And it doesn't hurt to have a dog, or maybe even just put up a sign that says beware of dog, even if you don't have a dog, like just to,
Right.
dissuade some people. You would tell people to be holistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not to go too crazy on any one of those,
Right.
and not to rely on any one of those, right?
Exactly.
And it's the same thing. Like if you're going to run a business, you need to pay attention, like what's your insurance protection? Like how have you set up your insurance? Does it cover you as well as possible? What is your entity structure? Did you set something up sort of thoughtfully and methodically and strategically? What are you doing with how you do business? There's some ways to do business that are way riskier than others. Like there's some types of business where if you do it a certain way, you're much more likely to be sued than
Mm-hmm.
if you do it a different way. So there's kind of operational issues that reduce your risk.
I, I think operationally is really, it goes back to you can't, is I forget where I read this, but you can't avoid being sued, but you can avoid losing a lawsuit. Some people are like, oh, you can't avoid being sued. And it's like, yes, that's true, but you can avoid losing a lawsuit. And it goes back to like the operational standpoint of you put a good team in place. Like you mentioned, you use an attorney to create all your documents, forms, and everything else, and use common sense. And if you don't know, don't guess. Use professionals who are licensed or experienced in that aspect of what they do. And then, it's kind of, it's risk mitigation from that perspective, that you want to mitigate a lot of these risks from that perspective. So,
And cheap can be so expensive.
oh, don't get
Cheap
me
can be so expensive. I mean,
yes.
I had someone call me and they said, hey, we got this nasty gram from the city saying, they want us to take down our wall that we just built. We just spent like $50,000 on this like brick decorative wall thing around our property. And it's like the gateway question is like, okay, did you have permits? Like, when was this built? Like, no, we didn't want to get permits because we would have had to hire an architect. That was going to be expensive. And it's like, well,
Now
taking down
charges
the
more.
taking down the wall is definitely more expensive than the architect.
It's funny because down the street from me, there's a house that just came on the market, and it's like a 3,000 square foot house on an acre that on a normal day should be, call it seven figures. It's on the market. It says like, almost finished for 500 grand. And I'm like thinking, okay, the land alone is kind of like what it should be worth. So I'm reading the comments, and then, so I, know the county codes very well because we built our house. And all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm like, oh boy. So there's a stream that runs through the property, and they literally built this house from the ground up on this property without getting a flood cert or a building permit to build this thing. It
Oh
was
boy.
in for approval, and they kept building it, thinking they were going to get it approved, but it's actually in a flood zone, and we have they come RPAs here, which is resource protection areas. Got to be 100 feet from wetlands. You literally open the front door to this place, and if you were drunk, you're going to fall down into the stream. That's how close it is. And I joked because my sister-in-law is looking for a house in this area. I said, you always wanted waterfront. Here you go. And it just goes to show like this, and the hard money lender is basically taking a bath on this one because he's the one that owns it now, but the person bought it for like 450, the lot. And then, probably put, several hundred grand into this thing. And now I mean, they basically, have to give it away. And I'm not even sure they'll be able to sell it, because it's like, it goes to what your point exactly, like not doing being cheap up front, and not doing what's right. It's going to come back and really burn them. So
You're gonna make an offer on that one, Chris?
no, actually, well, I shouldn't say that. Let me do a little more due diligence.
If you've always wanted a houseboat, it's kind of a houseboat.
Right.
It's one of those where it's like, okay,
Might float away.
well, if I could get it for really cheap, and use it as a rental, because I don't think anyone would want to own it. But again, this area is, with, Amazon coming to, 5 miles from where I am, and just, again, the high DOD presence where I'm located, rentals are at a premium, especially, again, short term for, 6 months to a year. So I'm like, ooh, that would actually be a decent rental. So I can't exclude it, but, one man's trash, another man's treasure.
So Flavia, I was just curious if I mean, we've touched on this a little bit already, but if you could speak to your own personal kind of investment portfolio and strategy, and what you've done so far and where you're headed in the future.
Sure. Oh man, okay. So I guess my very first real estate venture was when I was the college student that rented like the big multi-room apartment and then subleased all the rooms to like friends.
House
So
hacking. They call it house hacking now.
that was like my first, I guess, venture into that. And then at the time I knew somebody who rented a big house in Malibu, like gorgeous house in Malibu, right across the street from the beach, and lived there for free because he rented all the rooms out to different Malibu college students and probably other people too. And then he had converted like the basement and garage into like his suite and rented all the rooms upstairs and just had like this. And I remember as like, I don't know how old I was, maybe 19, 20, I was a college student. I was like, wow, this is brilliant, and I didn't end up doing that myself, but that was like my first sort of like light bulb moment of like, real estate is so cool. Like there's so many different ways to work it. And then because I knew that real estate was important, literally like as I was graduating from college, I was like, I'm not going to be a renter. I'm going to buy something. So I bought this teeny tiny 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo, 604 square feet. Like I could even tell you exactly what I paid for it, exactly where it was. I've, driven by there many times over the years. It's here in San Diego. Kind of almost under a freeway overpass. And you could hear the freeway like all the time, that I used to think to myself, oh, it's interesting. To me, it's just like the ocean now. Like I don't even notice it. And that was my first little purchase. And from there, ended up renting it moved on to a bigger 2-bedroom place, rented the 1-bedroom. And then that's kind of how you do it, right? You like build your ladder and slowly. And it's kind of funny because it becomes almost exponential in a way. Like you can start small with one property. And then if you play things right, it's not like you just grow slowly. You can sometimes leverage, or, there'll be a big appreciation bump and you'll sell at the right moment, and you can reinvest into like several properties, and you can kind of play markets against each other. So you can sell in one market when it's high and buy in another market that hasn't yet reached its peak, and sort of time things that way. So personally, we've owned a lot of, we started here locally in San Diego, owning some condos, townhouse, just within my family, and then 1031 exchanged. And for anyone who's not into that technique or doesn't know what it is, basically it means if you sell one property but you had some profits or some gain and you don't want to pay taxes on it, you can reinvest in a very strict way into other real estate so that you don't have to pay the taxes yet. The taxes get deferred. A lot of people think that the taxes just disappear. They don't. You actually just defer them. But then there's some like long-term strategies you can do with estate planning and stuff. But so we did that, and that leveraged the time that we did all the 1031 exchanges. I think it was like maybe 4 or so properties in San Diego that, exchanged into 14 single family homes like across the country.
Oh, wow.
Which was just kind of even Steven, like, the 4 for the 14, and like 4 shared, condo type places for 14 standalone single family homes.
So were those
So
more
again,
like
the differences in markets are crazy.
those like turnkey properties in the
Yeah, that was
Midwest, or?
in the Midwest. Yeah, Midwest and kind of towards the South. We had to do everything very quickly because it's a 1031 exchange. I guess we're going to do a quick primer, like the 2-sentence primer. You have 45 days to kind of figure out what properties you're going to buy after you close on the property you're relinquishing. And then you have to close within 6 months, which for some of these turnkeys, you do cut it close because some of them are still under construction when you go under contract. And but it all ended up working out pretty good. Because we're in so many different markets, I've actually had the experience of being the client of many property management companies, different ones in different markets. And I myself do property management. We do it here in San Diego. So it's very interesting to be a property manager, but also to be a client of property managers, because I think that makes me a great property manager because I get to like all the things I love about certain property managers I can implement in my own company. But then I'm also just exposed to so many different wrong ways to do it. We've already had to let go of one property management company, but the person we replaced them with is probably the best one of the group now. So, you just have to be vigilant and take care of your portfolio and know the people that are taking care of your things, and you have to stay on top of it. But having full service management when you're a long distance landlord is key, because really you just need someone local and someone on the ground to take care of your properties. When I hear people are trying to do it long distance, I don't really see the benefit in it, financially or stress level wise, or even liability wise. Like,
right.
I mean, we hear so many stories where you hear like, oh, I hired this contractor, or I hired, this, and all of a sudden it's like, they're sending you pictures of a property that's not even yours, and they're scamming out of money. I mean, there's so many schemes. I know, Jamie, somebody that was caught up in one of those, and it's from a long distance. I mean, I have some rentals, I have one up in the Pittsburgh area that kind of I got through my note investing, that it was actually more beneficial to keep it, and I actually like the way the house looked, which you shouldn't actually, make decisions based off of, pretty houses or whatnot. Sometimes it's more, business on what it cash flows, which it does, of course, do very well. But it was one of those things where, I would not have kept it. And I've looked at other markets to keep properties, but I can't find a good property manager. And I'm like, if I can't find somebody who, doesn't return a call within a specific time period, or, 2 days, it's like, I want nothing to do with you, because I know that's how you're going to manage my property. And it's going to be more stress. And then try and sell it. It's just, it will be a nightmare. So for me, it's just better off getting rid of it early on.
Yeah, that is a really key piece of buy and hold rental success. I think. I mean, we have my wife and I self-managed for several years, and we did, some rehabs like Chris, the Burr method basically. But, and then about almost 2 years ago, we hired a property manager locally. And for 6 of our 7 Maryland rentals. And I mean, he's great. It's a small company. It's like, 2 or 3 employees total, but manages about 100 properties, I think. And he also does construction. And then now that we have a rental that was a note, and now it's a rental in Florida, and we're actually buying another rental in Florida. I've got another property management company down there, and the 2 property management companies we have could not be more different. I mean, they could be, but they're very different, and I like them both. So it's been interesting for us to see kind of what you're talking about, Flavia, as far as like, I'm not a property manager, but I did self-manage for a while, and I'm now able to kind of compare the two management companies against each other. And, but yeah, I totally agree. It's critical to have that in place, especially from a distance, for sure.
I'll give you one crazy example. There was one property that had a turnover. It had just gotten a lot of work the last turnover. So it was very odd that it needed so much work again a year later. And the management company gave us it was like a 5-figure estimate on repairs. And we were just like, that can't be right. We said, can we just get at least 2 other estimates? And I was like, no, this is great. You should just go with this. And just started to just feel very like kickback situation, or something's going on here. And then they got one other estimate that was like triple, almost like making fun of us. I was like, that's impossible. Like that can't even be a real estimate. The first one was out of line, but triple, that's very odd. And then we switched property management companies, and the new property manager got someone to go out, give an estimate, and the estimate was completely reasonable and normal, fixed it up and leased it out. So I don't know if that other property management company was running a scam or what was going on. They were at least being very negligent and just not very good. But so you have to stay on top of it, and you can't just be passive, right? And just like accept like, well, they must be the experts, this must be just how it is. Like you have to be prudent and stay involved, even if you're hands off. Like even if you're not there physically, you still need to keep your finger on the pulse, so to speak, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. So
I had I mean, that's an example of like I had a property where I think to cut the grass on this property, I think they wanted, I don't know, it was like $3,000 to go cut the grass because, it was a property that was vacant and grass had grown to, it was like a foot tall, but, I get the number and it's like, yeah, it's going to be like $3,000. And I'm like, $3,000 to cut the grass. So I call up a local landscaper and it was like $200, and it's just like,
yeah, which makes sense, right? Like that is what it costs. And like, even if you're not local, you kind of have an idea of what it is. And, it's and then the longer you do it, the longer you're in real estate in general, or the longer you're a landlord, really kind of like the more because like the more you've seen and the more you've lived through and experienced, and particularly in my case, right, because I do this for other people, so I see it from that side. And then for our local, we didn't sell all of our San Diego rentals. We kept the few in the markets that I thought would continue to appreciate. But when we sold some of them, I thought that we were really topping out in most of San Diego. I was wrong. It continued to go up.
No, I mean, you win.
Oh, how?
As we start to wrap up this episode, two questions we like to ask. One is, you've already given a lot of things. The first is, do you have like a trial tribulation, something over the last like week or two that as a real estate investor, like everyone always hears like the real fun stories and all this stuff, but Jamie and I like to share like something crazy that's happened, or just share something. And again, I know also you're an attorney, so you gotta be careful some of the stuff you can share, but has there been something over the last month or so that you've had to experience that is just like really just exemplifies like, hey, this isn't all wine and cheese and toasting each other and living a lovely life of real estate? Is something like that happened recently?
Yeah, yesterday. So it's fresh.
That's recent.
Yesterday, it is very fresh. So so there's a property that we found. I'm like, I've been looking at it for years. Like, oh, I wish I owned that. I like that one. I think it's underutilized. It's a vacation rental over a retail storefront in a beach town. I was like, I just love that property. Every time I go to that beach and I walk around, I see the little sad, faded vacation rental sign. I'm like, they need to make that sign a little brighter. Like, how come they're not sweeping out? Like, that's the worst patio furniture I've ever seen. Like, how can they be doing well with that Airbnb if they're not putting love into it? So I've always wanted that property. And believe it or not, it went on the market like a month ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, cause we keep thinking that the market's going to drop next year. Like I don't have a crystal ball. Can't say it will for sure. I have my predictions, and I think next year is going to be a really good time to be an investor. So I don't want to buy anything or make any moves this year unless I'm selling something. I'd rather wait until next year and pick up some great deals. So I saw it go on the market. Of course, it's top of the market pricing. And I was like, oh, too bad. Right when they're selling it, it's at the top of the market, the property I've always wanted. So I talked to a lender about a week ago, because now I think the price is probably going to come down since it's sat on the market. And it's one of those things where the lending world is so interesting. It's a mixed use property. I could have qualified for an SBA loan if I wanted to operate my brokerage or law firm out of the retail space for a while, except that the residential overhangs the retail a little, just enough that the 50% threshold isn't met, because it has to be 50% for the business. And then the other 50% could be, residential or just some other use. So it would not qualify for an SBA loan, which would have been great because that's, 10, 15% down. So that's a
Yep.
really great.
Take a closet on the upper floor and turn it into retail storage.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was kind of the argument of like, well, what about if the garage, the one-car garage that belongs to residential is used for commercial storage? Like,
Yep.
but the SBA is government. They're not all about getting creative and like letting you, make arguments. Like it either is or it isn't. Like it, on the tax roll, it shows how it is, and that's it. The configuration is the configuration. So, so then I talked to my favorite lender and I'm like, all right, well, what about just a mixed use, like owner occupied, because it's a residential unit. Like what if it's owner occupied? Like I know someone who could live there and they would probably want to buy this because I even want to broker it, right? Not necessarily for me to buy it. And they were like, well, no, because we can only go to 700, 20, whatever as the conforming limit for mixed use in San Diego. If it was pure residential, we could go to like 2 million, but it's mixed use. So we don't go above the conforming. Like, strikeout. And then looking at the pro forma for the rental performance, the current owner has not done well with the property. So it's not performing that well. And so it wouldn't cover the debt service. So it would be in the red. And so a lender just doing a pure like commercial loan is not going to lend on it because the numbers won't work. That was yesterday. And then this morning, the agent calls me and says, well, we got a cash offer. And I was like, okay, well, I'm out.
That stinks.
We've had our eyes set on a property for like 4 years now. And, it's not on the market yet. And I'm glad it's not, because if it was on the market now, I wouldn't pay the price they're going to want for it. But they mentioned that they're not going to probably put it on the market till later part of next year. And I'm like, perfect, because I'm hoping by that time, like, hopefully the world gets back to some normalcy and then inventory hits the market again. And that, price that's up there right now brings things back down to normal. So
yeah.
Good.
Good luck on that. That's
exactly. So
yeah, I've struck out, but I hope you make that one go all the way. That sounds great.
I'm actually looking at it right now because it's actually my neighbor's house. So we want to basically, I joked to my wife, I'm like, I want to conquer my neighborhood and stuff. But so yeah, we'll see. Jamie, any final thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
This has been great. I mean, yes, there's a lot of you've got a lot of different experiences and different things you brought to the table. So I've enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, I'm a real estate nerd, and I love it all. I think it's all, and I get to do what I do in my own investing, but as a real estate lawyer, oh man, just the story, just seeing what everyone else is out there doing, right, is amazing. And helping clients solve all of their different problems in real estate, whether it's, someone who's into syndications or fix and flips or just all of that. It's a very vast and interesting and exciting world out there in real estate. So if anyone's listening to this episode because you're kind of a voyeur so far, but you're not actively involved in real estate, what's holding you back? Like, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be had. And there's room for everybody. That's the one.
Yeah, there's room for everyone, and there's a lot to learn up front. It's not like you just start buying something. There's a lot of there's a lot of education that you need to learn before you get into that business as well.
But we're all always learning the whole time.
No,
too,
you're always learning.
Find a mentor, find a mentor and learn and get in the game, because it's a long game. Real estate is not get rich quick. Even the people flipping are generally trying to build kind of a ladder, and they're not going to do as well in their first one as they will later when they've had a few under their belt. And so get in early. Like if someone's 17 and wants to get into real estate, I would do a happy dance, because if you start buying real estate at age 18, you will do great. You will retire. You will secure your retirement.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Yep, I agree.
Okay. Well, Flavia, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the Good Deeds Note Investing podcast. And as well, Jamie and I thank you for coming on. And as always, everyone, go out and do some good deeds. Thank you.